Dale, if you want to look at mine.
Hey folks, there is a QR code. Burke, it's at the back of the sanctuary. There's a little sign. And so if you pull that up on your phone, that will have the agenda and all the materials right there, so you don't have to scroll through your email. And I believe we have some printed packets as well, which are probably by the checkout desk. And so if you've got a printed packet and you want to share, that's great. Of course, we wanted to be mindful of the trees, so we didn't print dozens, but we have some.
Oh, it's lagging. It's lagging behind.
It does.
Okay, I just muted it, so.
The YouTube has about a 90-second lag.
And should we keep the mics on? Or should we turn them
I
off?
think
when we're
Cameron
not
will.
talking?
Cameron
Hello?
usually takes care of it.
He'll take.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll try to avoid saying
I'll try not to make random noises.
Exactly. Right. Right.
I hope I know what I'm doing.
Thing my friend Sherry made. They're,
Ah, there are people.
and it's a little UU symbol with the Progress Pride flag. They're handing them out
Ready?
all over. I like it.
I'm feeling very.
As the last folks are coming in, all right. Let me go ahead and welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you all could join us for the 2022-2023 annual meeting of our congregation. I'm Burke Kapler. I'm the UUCA president, and I'm the chair of the board of trustees. In our meeting today, we're going to be reviewing what we've accomplished and what we've gone through in the past year. And we're also looking ahead to the next year, 2023-2024. We'll be voting on a proposal to rename our worship center in the honor of Reverend James J. Reeb. We'll be voting on our 2023-2024 budget and the slate of nominees for church offices, both board members, church officers, and nominating committee members. We'll also be honoring those who have made extraordinary contributions to our beloved community. So, to begin, I would like to ask Reverend Amanda, our senior minister, to light our chalice and to offer an opening reading to center us. If you're watching on YouTube at home, I also invite you to light your own chalice at this time. With that, Reverend Amanda.
This chalice lighting comes from Robert French Levins, and it's an old one. It's in the back of the gray hymnal, but it's been a favorite of mine for some time. And although it is intended for worship, I feel as though the words relate to our work together in the annual meeting as well. So I invite you to listen with an ear for that. Holy and beautiful, the custom which brings us together in the presence of the Most High, to face our ideals, to remember our loved ones in absence, to give thanks, to make confession, to offer forgiveness, to be enlightened, and to be strengthened. Through this quiet hour breathes the worship of the ages, the cathedral music of history. 3 unseen guests attend: faith, hope, and love. Let all our hearts prepare them place.
Thank you, Reverend Amanda. I will now officially call this meeting to order, and we'll begin by having the UUCA Secretary, Jeff Mayer, go over some of the governance requirements for this meeting. As Secretary, Jeff will be taking notes during the meeting, and he'll be drafting the meeting minutes, which will be approved at the next annual meeting. Jeff?
Thanks, Burke. Hi, everyone. Let's all check in on a few important governance items for this meeting. Notice of the meeting was communicated to members and friends on June 1st, 2023, which was at least 10 days prior to the meeting per our bylaws. We've had reminder communications since then as well. I verified with Annie Parker that the confirmed member list of eligible voters was the list used to create the election buddy invitations to vote, with online voting opening last Friday at 1 p.m. and concluding today during the meeting. As secretary, I will also take minutes of this meeting, and those will be provided to the board for approval at its next meeting. The board authorized absentee ballots to count towards quorum. We will use members who vote to determine quorum. Over 106 members have already voted, so we do have quorum.
So thank you, Jeff. As chair, I'm appointing Lisa Lerman as parliamentarian for this meeting. Lisa will be available to help us resolve any bylaws, governance, or voting issues that may arise. To begin, I'd like to ask Reverend Carol Thomas Sissel to read our UUCA covenant to guide the conduct of this meeting. Rev CTC?
The UUCA Congregational Covenant. We covenant with each other, promising our goodwill and honest effort, pledging our care and support to one another and to our church community, challenging one another to live in accord with our Unitarian Universalist principles. With this common purpose as our source, we covenant. 1, to welcome all who come to us with acceptance and respect for the differences among us. 2, to practice patience and speak the truth directly and with compassion. 3, to reflect carefully about the potential results of our words and actions before we speak or act. 4, to keep our discussions to topics and issues rather than personalities. 5, to acknowledge that we may not always agree with the group decision, but we will still support and participate in the decision-making processes that are collaborative and democratic. 6, to seek to resolve disagreements to our mutual satisfaction and to ask for help when needed. 7, to speak directly to those with whom we have disagreements. 8, to facilitate direct communication between parties in conflict when appropriate. 8, to facilitate direct communication. Oh, I repeated myself. 9.
We really want that one.
We really want that one now. Yes, I'll say that one again, number 8. To facilitate direct communication between parties in conflict when appropriate. 9, to act with loving kindness, seeking to promote justice, equity, and compassion. 10, to speak out with loving kindness when we witness disrespectful interactions. And finally, 11, to understand that building our beloved community requires learning and patience. The UUA Congregational Covenant.
Thanks, Rev CTC. Let's now turn to an overview of the agenda. You should have this in your packet or available through the QR code, but I'm going to ask Jeff and Lisa to just walk us through what's going to happen for the remainder of the meeting.
The first item will be Reverend CTC, UUCA's Minister of Social Justice and Community Development, leading us in remembering those who we hold in memoriam this year. Then Burke will review the board's work during the past year, and Reverend Amanda will provide the senior minister report.
Following the senior minister's report, we're moving the awards and recognition to this part of the meeting before we get to the voting matters. After the awards, we'll move to the voting matters, starting with the approval of the minutes of last year's meeting. We will present and discuss each of the voting matters, but because we're using one email ballot for all items, rather than voting on them one at a time, we will vote on all of them at once by taking a 10-minute voting break after the final voting item discussion period concludes. As we all know, we've had to adapt our in-person practices so that they work for hybrid meetings and virtual voting. We're prioritizing our covenant and our commitment to ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. Rather than formally calling for motions and seconds on the voting items, we will present each item and then open the floor for discussion before asking for the vote. Jeff will then announce the election results and the conclusion of the meeting.
Thank you, Jeff and Lisa. So with that, I'll turn to the first agenda item, and I'll ask our Minister of Social Justice and Community Development, Reverend Carol Thomas Sissel, to come back for a remembrance of the members that we hold in memoriam for this year. Rev CTC.
Quite often on Sunday, I ask you all to breathe. Let's take a breath in now and let that breath out and prepare ourselves to remember those we have lost. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. This is our gathered community, the place where strangers become friends and friends become family. This space is where our collective joins as one. Here, we are connected to each other and to the past, the present, and the future of our community. We never truly lose those connections. We never truly lose our friends and members of the UUCA family. But in this past year, 8 different persons have passed on. Let us remember them together. And as I say each of their names out loud, will you please respond with "We will remember them"? Reverend Joan Gelbine.
We will remember them.
Rilda Chatfield.
We will remember them.
Pam Collins.
We will remember them.
Nancy Firestone.
We will remember them.
Shannon Flynn.
We will remember them.
Ilya Malkoff.
We will remember them.
Matt Powell.
We will remember them.
Margaret Wilson.
We will remember them.
As you think of those we have lost, those who have left our community in body but not in spirit, be strong, be well, be loving, and never forget what they gave to us. And remember, most importantly of all, none of us is on this journey alone. Amen.
Thank you, Rev CTC. I'd like now to present the Board of Trustees. I'm sorry? Oh, Jean. Yes, in fact.
Dorothy died July 6th of this past year, 1922. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll keep Dorothy in our memory. Thank you, Jean. I'd like to turn now to the Board of Trustees annual report. This too was part of the meeting materials that were distributed, and for those of you who may not have had the chance to read it, I'd like to give you a few highlights. I'm going to focus on the board's work as a whole, mostly because our 3 standing committees, the Governance Committee, the Board Finance and Audit Committee, and the Ministerial Assessment Committee, have been so busy that reciting all of the work that they have done would take up more time than you, I think, and we want to spend. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the annual report for discussions about what the committees are working on. So this will focus mostly on the board. And I have to say, I was thrilled, for those of you who heard Reverend Amanda's mashup sermon this morning, just 45 minutes ago, I think, because she was talking about transition, the framework for transition, and transition as a theme. And I think that has been where the board has been this year, in a period of transition. We're coming out of COVID. We are seeing I'm going to knock on wood as I say this, the end of the pandemic, but we're moving into a new territory that's different for everybody. And so a lot of figuring out what we are and where we are going is what animated the board this year. In specific, we developed 5 goals. They were, number 1, to promote positive, non-anxious leadership. Number 2, to support, yeah, and by the way, that means something, not just chill leadership, but non-anxious leadership. Number 2 was to support a diverse UUCA by centering anti-racist, anti-oppression, and multicultural work. Number 3 was to increase transparency and to expand board communications to the congregation. Number 4 was to intentionally and visibly model welcome in this community. And number 5 was to encourage a joyful celebration of our 75th anniversary. We've done great work to meeting these goals. To highlight a few accomplishments. So in February, and I will figure out this microphone in a second. All right. In February, we held our annual Vision of Ministry conference to facilitate a discussion among various lay leaders and develop an annual vision for 2023-2024. This is a short 3-point list of things that the church hopes to do in that coming year. And they are, number 1, to increase participation in more anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multicultural trainings to build that more welcoming community we want to be. Number 2 was to center UUCA's programming around Unitarian Universalism's articulated values as expressed in the UUA's foundational documents, inviting our UUCA members and friends to study with and engage in those values. And number 3 is to grow the number of UUCA members and friends who are actively engaged in leadership and volunteering, deepening the sense of connection in this community. It was a lively discussion. This is a great vision for next year, and it lays a framework and a compass point for the work that we'll be doing. It also did 2 other things. It helped us identify some new lay leaders, and I'm proud to say that some of the folks that you will be voting on, or maybe you already voted on, were at that AVM meeting contributing their visions already. And number 2, it laid a foundation for an annual planning cycle that we can and will follow next year. So if you liked the annual vision of ministry last February, I hope you will come back to the one that will be happening next February. We can continue to move, so that's what we did in terms of leadership. We continue to move forward toward a vision of a more diverse UUCA. The board has been meeting with the active Racial Justice Task Force and will be following through on some of the recommendations and assessments recommended by that task force. In terms of transparency, we've striven to be as transparent and welcoming as possible. Hopefully you all have seen my board bulletin pieces and connections, or just chatted with me or another board member at the welcome desk, or after the service, or in fellowship hall over coffee. And then for other developments, for example, the proposal being voted on today to rename the worship center, the board and its committees have done special discussion sessions, and I hope you have found those useful to give you an opportunity to talk to us and give us your views, or just have a chance to check in on what you see happening with the congregation. And of course, like you, we've celebrated and we continue to celebrate the 75th anniversary, and we've got more happening in that vein, even in this very meeting. So the other work of the board that I want to highlight is our work discussing an open question. And by the way, open question is capital O, capital Q. This work follows on advice from Dan Hotchkiss, who is a key congregational consultant who has written the seminal work on church governance and has provided the governance model that we are explicitly following. And he recommends that as part of the board's usual planning and business, the board take time to think deeply and discerningly about an open question. And the open question we as a board talked about this year, and we did it at virtually every meeting that we had, and in fact we did it at a special meeting too, was to ask ourselves, who are we becoming post-pandemic? This work is deeper, and it's a lot less measurable than other goals. But for me, it's much more interesting as we grapple with and think about and try to define who we are as a community and where that community is going. And I have to say that I don't have any specific answers yet, and I don't think the board has any specific answers either. These are not true or false or multiple choice questions. And thinking about the framework of a transition, we are very much there, I think the board saw. We're coming out of a period of uncertainty and moving into a new one. And so as we do our work next year, we'll be thinking more about who we are, where we can be. That may be the open question that we adopt to do the same question again, or we could find other variations of that question to think through. But if you have thoughts about that, and if you have input you'd like to give, of course, always please grab a board member because it helps shape our discussions. So with that, I'm going to conclude the formal report from the board as far as the progress in 2022-2023. But I will note that the agenda also has me discussing the General Assembly delegates, I will tell you that that's the General Assembly this year. It's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Go Steelers. The board approved 15 delegates. You can find their names in the nominating committee's slate of materials. Registration is still open. So if you'd like to be a delegate, please contact a member of the nominating committee. Mary Pike, for example, is here today. And if you would like to attend GA, but you just can't get to Pittsburgh, please keep an eye out for more information about watch parties here at UUCA so that you could participate virtually. All of that is going on. And with that, I'll turn it over to Reverend Amanda for the Senior Minister report.
Thank you so much, Burke. And I actually want to add to that delegate piece, if I may. One of our delegates has already paid for their registration, but turns out to not be able to attend and wanted to pay that forward. So if there's someone who would like to attend, but for whom the registration cost, which is not nothing, let me tell you, was too much, please come and talk with me or with Mary, and we have a registration that can just be transferred over, as I understand it. So would love to have that used and make that happen. So believe it or not, I am finishing my 3rd year here serving UUCA. Thanks. When people ask, so how's it going at UUCA? I often begin by saying, well, let's see, I started in August 2020, and then everyone goes, oh. Oh, I see. And it has felt like, I think the first year of really getting to know people just through screens, the second year, which felt like the first year over again, but different. But here as I finish the 3rd year, I feel as though I am able to connect even more with even more of you. Though still today, and almost every Sunday, I had 2 people come up to me and say this was their first time back in the building, in the sanctuary, since before COVID. So it's still happening, right? We're still learning to regather together and finding our way to each other. I thought for my report today, I wrote an annual report, and I encourage you to read it because I wrote it, and so it would be nice to know that people do spend time on it as well on the other end of things. But I thought that I would just give you some highlights by noting things I have learned about UUCA this year in what is my first essentially normal, that is, none of our programming was canceled because of COVID year with you. That's just this year. Things that I have learned. Well, I have learned that we love our people. We had a lot of different staff transitions this year, both welcoming 3 new staff members in August at the very beginning of the year, and then also saying goodbye to Sophia Moriali, saying goodbye and thank you to Diane from her role as lay pastoral, as commissioned lay minister for pastoral care, though as I look at Diane, we're not saying goodbye, Diane, but, and most recently saying goodbye to Sarah Masters, a reminder to come next Sunday and say goodbye and thank you in person after the service. And by the end of the summer to Greg, our intern, Greg Bonin. So we've had a lot of transition during this time. And of course, people have shared all the gratitude that they have for the work that folks have done, for the way that they brought beautiful programming and ministry to the congregation. But what I have also experienced in those transitions, both the goodbyes and the hellos, is simply how much this congregation cares for its staff and its leadership, how much the congregation loves and wants to love its new staff and leadership, all of those pieces as we've welcomed folks and said goodbye. I have learned how much we love our people. I have learned how much we love Christmas. This was my first in-person Christmas Eve with UUCA after the very close to the day cancellation in my second year. And it was a joy to be with you and to light candles, not just electric ones in our hearts or across a screen, but real ones next to each other. So I have learned that we love Christmas, and not only do we love Christmas, we love all of the holidays around it with our interfaith pageant that celebrated both Christmas and Hanukkah, along with our friends from Kol Ami and our solstice service. We love the holidays. I have learned that we love to collect, as I have watched RevCTC lead the food pantry collections, and even just in this past month, the household supplies collections, the coat collections, and more canned food collections in December. We love to bring to the church our resources and then to send them out. And I see that over and over again with tangible things and with our Share the Plate and other social justice efforts. We love to learn and to mentor here. How many of you participated in any of the LEAD programming? That's Leadership Exploration and Development at UUCA. Our LEAD programming brought together more than 30 folks in a regular cohort that met throughout the year, and then well over 50 folks that dropped in for some of the classes, and really brought together people who were new to leadership and very experienced in leadership at the church to be able to support each other and to learn together. I'm so grateful for the leadership of Greg and of Leanne in that LEAD program, and we're really excited that it'll be coming back next year, and I hope that if you haven't participated, you'll participate. And I know that those who did participate wanted to make sure that they could come back and still participate, apparently, so that's good too. I have learned that we love to be together. Our attendance pretty steadily rose, actually starting last year when we were able to come back from Omicron, of course, dipping down for the summer as it always does, but then over the course of the year this year, we saw attendance steadily increasing on Sundays, both in religious education and in worship upstairs and during our all ages multi-generational worship. And so it's been good to begin to regather in person, even as we find ways to continue to loop in folks who are far apart and to gather online. We've added our online Zoom service once a month and continue, of course, to live stream on Sundays. I have learned that we love to remember in this church. As we celebrate our 75th anniversary, I think one of my favorite things this year has been seeing the fellowship hall just covered in photographs, both collected by Bob and Chris, and also brought in by all of you, photographs from the last 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 and 50 and 60 and even sometimes 75 years, telling the story of this congregation. We've seen that as well during our 75th anniversary testimonials on Sunday mornings, and been able to track the things that have changed and then how much has stayed the same. We love to remember. And finally, I was very excited to learn that we love to dance at this church. At our 75th party, that kind of was the culmination of our several celebrations. We had a great time on the dance floor with the DJ, and yes, yes, please do applaud. And I was so grateful. I was so grateful for that time and for the chance to see and experience and be with UUCA in a different way than we usually are on Sunday morning. I want to close, as I often do at annual meetings, simply by giving you an opportunity to express appreciation for your leadership and particularly for your staff. And I want to hold both the staff that continue to serve the congregation and those who have held roles, who have transitioned out this year, who have moved on, but who have been so important for UUCA's life for so many years and have given in many ways. And so I want to invite you in this moment, one, to make a plan to send an email, to send a thank you to someone who's made a difference to you, to show up on Sunday and say thank you to Sarah, to send a card, all of those pieces, but also in this moment to express your appreciation to our amazing staff and to your leadership here at UUCA.
So sometimes, no matter how much planning and it took a great deal of planning to put this together, we make a mistake. And when we make a mistake, we not only acknowledge it, we may have to punt. So I'm going to punt. One of the names that was not on the list of those remembered was Dorothy Mulligan. Dorothy was a vital, vibrant, important part of this community. And I want to say her name, and you say exactly what you said before. We will remember them. Dorothy Mulligan.
We will remember them.
We will remember her.
Thanks, Rev CTC.
All right, I would like now to turn to the awards and recognition portion of the meeting. And for that, I'm going to turn things back over to Reverend Amanda to kick things off.
Excellent. Except actually, I'm going to turn things back over to Rev CTC. Yes, you're next. Rev CTC, who is going to present the Unsung Hero Awards, though I think these names were chosen, right?
Oh,
by Sarah Masters. So, we'll hold that as she presents. Here we go.
An unsung hero is someone who simply does it all the time. Whatever it is, whether they're an usher, whether they're part of helping us put together a social justice project, whether they're the ones who pass out a book to our ambassadors. Our unsung heroes this year are Dee Emery for the work that she's done on the Rib East reception and the Sweet Memories reception. And when I say the work that she did, that's that food, guys. The amazing, amazing things that we had to put in our mouths after those things. Dee Emery is an unsung hero. And the second one is someone you all know who is ever present. Jim Terpstra is here every time we need an usher, every Sunday morning to welcome folks, and is immensely gracious and just welcoming. So an unsung hero also, Jim Terpstra. I thought he was here. Is he in the building? I think not.
Okay, well, people are going to say something.
They're going to say something to him. Yeah, they will.
I have the honor of presenting what is charmingly titled the Lightness of Being Award. When I came to UUC, I said, what exactly is the Lightness of Being Award? And I think as you're going to hear, there's actually a connection to one of the ministers that served here, to Joan Gelbine. No, is that right? No, I'm looking at, is that right? Yeah, that's true. That's true. Good, okay, suddenly I thought Alan looked unclear about that. For bringing a joyfulness. And so I would like to invite Ramsey. Where's Ramsey? I just started, come on up. It's so appropriate, Ramsey. Literally, as I sat down up here, Linda said to me, oh, I love those beautiful colors in the windows. And I said, yes, of course, Ramsey made those. If you see something beautiful in the building, the answer is usually, oh, Ramsey made that. Like literally, she made it. She learned how to use a whole machine at the Arlington Library to cut out these incredible logos that we use on our pulpit now. Ramsey made that. Oh, the flowers that are so beautiful, Ramsey made that. Ramsey has also this year been working with Kit Britton to incorporate native flowers into our floral arrangements. Everywhere and every time I turn, Ramsey is trying to make the sanctuary more beautiful. And not only that, but to make the worship come alive through that beauty. So Ramsey, I'm just so grateful to work with you and for all that you have brought to us. Thank you so much. Yay, Ramsey! Is Leanne here? Oh, hi, Leanne.
Good morning, friends. It is my pleasure to present the Religious Education McQuethy Award for extinguished service in the Ministry of Lifespan Faith Development. This year, that award goes to Dana Cook. Dana, would you mind popping up? Yay, Dana! Not only has Dana, hi Dana, good to see you. Not only has Dana served in our Ministry of Education teaching RE classes for at least a decade, your involvement in this ministry predates my service here at UUCA. I particularly came to depend on you, Dana, during the pandemic, when Dana was a leader in helping me figure out how do we provide our children with quality religious education that is engaging in a virtual environment. No small task, I assure you. Dana was there for me. You've provided so much professional guidance. Dana is a consummate master teacher, a skilled teacher, just in education in general, also working with special education children. So lots of experience, lots of talent, lots of skill. And then I want to speak just a little bit about her creativity. During the last year, coming back was no small challenge either. Engaging our families, figuring out our staffing was a challenge. Not everybody was ready to come back into a classroom. Dana worked with me and engaged a lot of our community partners to come in and supplement some of our teacher shortage, something I didn't even think about. So just the creativity and the thinking and the care that you bring. I also want to say a little bit about Dana's not just a leader in religious education. Dana volunteers and gives of her spirit and her time in many ministries here, covenant groups, adult education, peace camp, things like that. So Dana, perfect choice for this award. Thank you. So grateful to you and your friendship and your leadership all these years I've been here and before serving this congregation. Thank you, Dana.
Our next award is the Joseph Fisher Community Service Award. Is Sarah Yu in the building?
She sure is.
Come on up. Okay, stay right there while I wax poetic. Sarah has tirelessly managed our partnership with the Path Forward bagged meal program. Those meals go to people who are experiencing homelessness. And now off script, one of the things we have dedicated ourselves to here at UUCA is feeding people in need in any way, shape, or form that we can. Sarah works tirelessly to put together bagged meals. She doesn't just make sandwiches, though. She runs the board and the team of people who do it. If you've ever had to schedule volunteers who don't operate regularly, but on a drop-in basis, when they can fill in, when they can make a sandwich, when they have some time free, then you know what kind of work she does. We are grateful to Sarah for managing our partnership, for making sure that people get fed, and for believing in social justice here at UUCA. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Amanda's watching me very carefully.
Just want everybody else to do as well.
The mic has to go up. Okay. Amanda's watching me very carefully because I've been a little unstable at some points.
I'm ready, Ken. I'm ready.
Very good. I'm comforted, yes. And when Amanda asked me to again sub, I've subbed a number of times this year, to fill in for the to-be-announced new director of music, because that is the person that makes the nominations for this next award, which is the Vera Tilson Award. And for those of you who are not familiar with the name Vera Tilson, she came to this church in the early 50s, and I was not here then. And she served this congregation for decades, and I understand about 4 decades, as a matter of fact, and developed the music program here to an expanded level. So she went from choir director to director of music. And in that, when she retired, the church decided to, or the music department, I'm not sure who, decided to make an award available, because she did not do that alone. You don't build a music program with a director of music, you build it with a lot of people and a lot of volunteers. And it takes dedicated volunteers to make the program grow. And so the award goes to the individual who has done the most in overall to assist the music program in developing. This year's 2022-23 recipient is Cliff Gay. Cliff, come on. Stand right there. When Sophia came to our congregation as the director of Transformational Music Ministries, that's a mouthful, Cliff was there to help on the database and to help in any way that needed to be done. And what he did was take care of putting rehearsal tracks on the database so the choir members could practice their things. And when Sophia needed to step aside, I was subbing, and Cliff was there, and he took care of everything. And then when Jane was forced, she was the librarian, Jane Ronigan, and she was forced to retire from those duties. Again, Cliff stepped up, took care of the library, and continues to do that. And I witnessed this willingness to do whatever you want to do this morning. When Jesse had to go to another commitment, he came to Cliff to take care of things when he had to depart quickly. And without hesitation, he did that. And he's always there with all the members of the choir, or if you've been a participant in any part of the music program, current or past, would you just stand for a moment? Yeah. Congratulations, Cliff. Thank you so much. Thank you.
One of the joys of the award process, because I am tasked with the Distinguished Service Award, is that it's often an opportunity for me to learn about times at UUCA before I arrived a few years ago. The Distinguished Service Award is given each year to someone who may have an important role now and have been offering service this year, but really who has been offering service for many years in the past, in many different roles, right? This is someone who has had a longevity of service and leadership in the congregation. And so when I go about thinking about that, I turn to the staff and to the lay leadership so that I can understand, before I got here, what were the roles that people held and who might we honor in this year. And so it is my great pleasure, and I think that she's coming up to join us, to share and offer the Distinguished Service Award this year to Gretchen Menn. Yeah. Now, I know that Gretchen serves on the welcome team at the welcome desk as one of the Sunday ambassadors, and I know that Gretchen has done social justice work. In fact, I saw her excellent League of Women Voters video last year, right? I know about those aspects. What I didn't know, because it happened before I came on, and perhaps you don't, is that Gretchen also was at one point the coordinator of the welcome desk, served on the board of trustees here at UUCA, has had numerous leadership roles over the years, and indeed that service has been distinguished. So I am so pleased to offer the Distinguished Service Award for all of the ways that you have and continue to lead and to serve at UUCA to Gretchen. Thank you so much, Gretchen.
This brings us to our final award, which is the Chair's Award. And I feel like the Chair's Award is the award that we use, that the chair gives to someone or some group of people, spoiler alert, who undertake a significant project to benefit the church in the previous year. And so as I was thinking about this award, it took literally about 10 seconds to identify this group and say, these are the people that we need to recognize and to thank for what happened this year. And of course, it is the members of the 75th anniversary team, the folks who put on so many events to remind us who we were, to show us who we are, to bring us together, and for giving us fun and desserts and dancing and a chance to be together. So for those folks who are members of the 75th anniversary team, I'm gonna read their names. I know, because I kind of gave them a hint that we would be doing this, that a lot of them are not here today. But for those of you who are here, and I think I see a couple, and there we are. Let me list their names. They are Pat Bodner, Bob Deniston, Bill Fogarty, Phyllis Liner, Tommy Lowe, Jane McKeel, Joan Perry, Amy Stock, and Chris Sutton. If you heard your name and you're here today, could you come up to the front?
Somehow they only printed two, so let's get them I'm not sure. Cassie did it, and she only printed two of the certificates, so we have to work on it. I don't think.
All right, so we have certificates we will be presenting to them once they're printed. So for the team,
We only have two of those.
thank you so much. Thank you. And now, as part of the celebration and recognition of our 75th anniversary, Alan Kieswetter and Bill Fogarty would like to recognize lay leadership over the years. Alan and Bill, take it away.
Oh, yes, yep. Yes, I'm gone.
Let's see. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Okay.
And me? Yes. Well, Bill, it's been a decade since we made a presentation like this. Last time was in 2012 when we co-chaired the capital campaign. Sorry, but can you hear me now? Oh, good. Shall I start again then? All right. Well, Bill, it's been a decade since we've made a presentation like this. The last time was in 2012 when we co-chaired the capital campaign to renew our spirit, to renew our spaces. Well, what's our topic today, Bill?
Well, today we're celebrating UUCA's lay leadership over 75 years. You know, we've had over 70 board chairs during that time, including 3 married couples. The answer to that trivia question would be Mike and Natalie Hall, Elaine and Mike Serlin, and Wade and Mary Lathram. To give you an idea of the longevity of the Latham's commitment, Wade was chair in 1958, Mary was chair 28 years later in 1986.
3 wonderful couples. Well, did you know we had a board chair who presided at a board meeting in a gorilla suit?
Tell us more, Alan.
Well, it was Claudia Blake in 1996, and she used a banana for a gavel. Needless to say, it was a tough time. But she says the banana preserved good humor for the entire board meeting. Claudia worked hard. She went so far as to establish an office here at the church with regular hours in a time of transition. So anyway, if you would step forward, please. I'd like to present you, if you would, Burke, with the Claudia Blake gavel for use as necessary.
Well, with my historian hat on, I would note that even back in the 1960s, when the first church history was written, someone commented that UUCA was the Church of the Perpetual Crisis. Now, I think that was an unfair characterization, and I prefer to use Reverend Amanda's characterization that we heard today. We sometimes have AFGE, another fun growth experience.
Well, sustaining a vibrant church requires a lot of diplomacy and a lot of participation by our congregation. We have frequently found strength in the motto, "We are the church," as we move from time to time.
Now, today we have honored members of the community for their service to our community, and we're about to elect board members. Do you have any advice, Alan?
Well, I have a simple phrase. I found UUCA members are willingly led, but hard to push. You have to do your homework to build support in the congregation, but the result is almost always positive, generous, and I would add edifying. Your advice?
Well, at a moment of congregational discernment a few years ago, I was inspired by the sermon of Reverend Beth Miller. I handed out EpiPens. They were to remind us to assume positive intent. I still have some pens left, so I'd be happy to pass them along to the newly elected members today.
Bill, you've spent a lot of time in the archives. Who stands out to you as an example of a UUCA superhero that may inspire us today?
I would offer up Ruth Tryon. Ruth was the first woman elected as board chair in 1952, and she wrote the first history of the church in 1968. But what really inspired me was my research into newspaper articles from 1954 in the Richmond newspapers. The Virginia General Assembly was holding a hearing about Virginia's response to Brown versus Board of Education. There were over 100 speakers in attendance that day, most in favor of segregation. Ruth waited for over 10 hours until 10:30 at night to give her testimony on behalf of our church. Hers was the lonely voice urging immediate integration. I think that took courage and determination on her part. Who would you name, Alan?
Well, I think of Joe Fisher, for whom we give an award every year. He was board chair in 1956. He went on to become moderator of UUA for 12 years. He was elected congressman 3 times. And the part that I like the best, I think, is the fact that he was also Arlington County moderator or board chair. And there's a phrase that lives on called the Arlington Way that he basically founded, which means leadership through consultation and consensus.
As always, it is inspiring to recognize the lay leaders at each annual meeting, and this year has been no exception. Congratulations to all. Do you have any other awards history to share, Alan?
Well, a little bit. The Unsung Hero Award is the oldest that we have given, and it started in 1967. And it was the only award that we gave for about 20 years. But I remember well in 1991 when the award went to Nancy Ann Graham, Dick Graham's wife. And it was supposed to be a surprise. It came time for the ceremony, and we looked around for her. And then she was found in the church kitchen cleaning the oven. This is, I truly, unsung hero.
I appreciate the Distinguished Service Award, which was initiated in 1998 by Board Chair Kathy Brayman, created to honor Eve Maroney, who was completing 3 decades of service as the church's volunteer budget officer. Eve had come to the U.S. as a refugee in 1940 when the Germans invaded France. He was known as a budget wizard. And I see Bob Gayer is here today, so if you want any stories about Eve, Bob Gayer, raise your hand. He's the person to talk to.
Yeah. Well, I would like to talk about the Incredible Lightness of Being award, which Amanda mentioned. And this was something that Joan and I cooked up when I was board chair. And partially because Joan had a certain lightness of being about her. But also, we both agreed that there is some sort of spirit of lightness that serves the congregation well, whether it is Claudia Blake in her gorilla suit or just the shining smile. So that's the brief history of that.
Thank you, Alan. So if you all would like to hear more stories about UUCA lay leadership, Alan and I are organizing a couple of story sessions after services this summer. Whether it was as a board member, part of a committee or task force, or RE teacher, you all are welcome to attend, and we really look forward to hearing your stories and sharing stories between one another. The first session is after service on June 25th in the boardroom. Please come and share what are some lessons learned that can inform how we relate to one another as we go forward. And we hope maybe we can springboard into doing more StoryCorps stories to be recorded.
Well, whether you are here with us in the sanctuary or online, I would like to conclude by asking you to stand in body or spirit as I mention your group. First, I would like to invite the past and present board chairs. Would you please stand? Past and present board members. Past and present church officers. We thank you. Please remain standing. Next, I would like... Next, I would like to ask all present and past recipients of church awards. We know there are some here. Would you please stand in body or spirit? And we thank you too. And then finally, I'd like everybody to stand because you're all lay leaders by definition if you're here. And I would like you to shout after me, "Happy anniversary, UUCA," on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Happy anniversary, UUCA!
Would you perhaps join me in thanking Bill and Alan, themselves board chairs, for all of their service and leadership over many years? I didn't know he was going to give you the banana.
We call that the Bill and Alan show as we were planning for this, just so you know. So, and we were not disappointed. Thank you. Thank you, guys. So with that, we've concluded, I think, what we'd call the entertainment portion of our program. And now we're going to move to the business item. We're going to talk about the voting items on our agenda. And so I'd like Lisa and Jeff to walk us through the procedure that we're going to follow, just as a reminder, again, on how we're going to discuss and conduct the voting. So Lisa, would you take it away?
Thanks, Burke. I previously mentioned that we would be modifying our procedures to accommodate our hybrid meeting format. The bylaws include a commitment to run meetings of the congregation in such a way as to maximize inclusion and to ensure that all voices are heard. In practice, that means we will introduce each voting item in turn: the minutes of last year's annual meeting, the proposal to rename the worship center, the 2023-24 budget, and the nominating committee slate of trustees and officers. After each topic is introduced, we will open the floor for comments or questions on that item. When the period for discussion on one item has concluded, we will move to the next topic, and we will break to vote on all items after we've presented and discussed everything.
For the discussion periods, if you're a UUCA member entitled to vote and would like to speak, you can join a line down either side aisle to one of the microphones. For those members who are not physically in the sanctuary, we invite you to participate in the discussion periods by writing in the YouTube comments. Lisa will read the YouTube comments after we hear the comments from people who are physically in the sanctuary. Lisa will call on those who have not yet spoken on an item before calling on anyone who wishes to speak for a second time. As we share our comments, let's remember that all discussion will be done within UUCA's congregational covenant, including to speak the truth directly and with compassion, to reflect carefully about the potential results of our words and actions before we speak or act, and to keep our discussions to topics and issues rather than personalities.
To ensure that we have an opportunity to benefit from everyone's input, we will all need to limit our comments to 2 minutes or less. I will be keeping track of the time so that you don't need to. And for each speaker, when you're down to 20 seconds left, I'm going to hold up this sign, which I made just for this purpose. And after the 20 seconds elapses, I will call time, and then I'll go 10, 9, 8. Okay, and when I get down to 1, we'll ask that we move on to the next member. We ask you to respect these time limits. They're an important part of our meeting covenant, and I don't want to have to cut anyone off, so please pay attention to the signals and stop when you're supposed to.
Finally, if you write a comment on YouTube and then change your mind or find that someone else has made your point before it's been read, please type your name and withdrawn in the comments.
After the conclusion of the discussion period for the last voting item, we'll take a 10-minute recess to allow members who have not yet voted to vote using the link provided in the email from Election Buddy. For those who have not yet voted, a reminder email was sent at the beginning of this meeting, so it should be near the top of your inbox. And after our 10-minute recess, we will reconvene.
All right. Thank you, Jeff and Lisa. One point on comments from folks within the sanctuary. This stand over here will have a microphone at roughly head height, higher height, and then there are 2 microphones over there for accessibility reasons at different heights. So if you need to use one or the other, please do so based on your needs. And so with that, we're going to move to our first voting item, which are approval of the minutes from our previous congregational meeting on June 5th, 2022. Jeff?
Thank you, Burke. The notice of the meeting was sent to all members with several attachments, one of which was the minutes from the June 5th, 2022 annual meeting. That is for last year's meeting.
So we're now going to open that discussion period on the minutes from the last meeting in 2022. We're scheduling about 10 minutes for this discussion, although if we don't have comments, we don't have to go that long. We're not going to. We're ready for anyone who has any comments or questions on the minutes from the last meeting, and we'll start with comments or questions from anyone in the sanctuary. And we also have 2 board members who are able to help with comments. Are there any comments or questions from members in the sanctuary about the 2022 annual minutes? I don't see any comments or questions in the sanctuary. Lisa, are there any comments or questions on the YouTube feed?
There are not.
Okay. Sorry, we thought there would be some. Hold on. All right. If there's no further discussion, then we're going to move to our second voting item, which is the proposal to rename the Worship Center. And I'm going to ask Linda Battolini to give an overview of the proposal to rename the Worship Center. After that, we'll open the floor for a similar discussion period. So, Linda?
I don't think I'll need the banana. So. Thank you, Burke. Many of you who have been involved in the discussion have heard some of this presentation before, but I'd like to just go through the board's process of accepting the proposal and working through it, so it would be ready to come to you for a vote at the annual meeting. In February of 2022, the board and Reverend Amanda received a proposal from about 27 members of our congregation that we consider naming the worship center after James J. Reeb. And the board said, well, how do we do that? How do we go about deciding whether to name a room after someone notable in our history? So last year, we had a lot on our plate, and we kind of tabled it and said we would come back to it again this year. And we got a reminder from the group in February saying, remember that request we made? And so we then moved on to study under what circumstances you might name a room after someone from our history. And we decided we needed a policy statement that would clarify just how we do that and what our procedure would be. So we developed a policy that the purpose was that we would define how we would officially dedicate a room in our building, because it's important that the naming of a room contributes to the culture of the congregation. And it reflects the values and the actions of the person whose name is chosen or the group whose name is chosen. So when we put together this proposal, we felt it should have the following process: that a proposal to dedicate a room on church property must be submitted in writing, either email or paper, to the board and the senior minister up to 2 weeks before the February board meeting, so that we would have enough time to consider, for the board to consider it, for the senior minister to consider it, and for us to be able to get ready to vote on it in the annual meeting. And we wanted we wanted this to be part of our democratic process, not simply a board decision, but a congregational decision that we felt it was important enough to name a room after the person recommended. This process is an open process. We're only naming one room this year through this proposal, but it means that we could gradually decide to name other rooms after others over time. We wanted to have at least 25 church members who would support the proposal and would sign a petition or a proposal. And this was one of the biggest things we struggled with was, did we want to do it in response to a donation, or did we want to separate this kind of decision from any monetary consideration? And we came down soundly on the side of it would not be based on a contribution, that no one would be able to buy the name of a room in our church, that it would be a decision by the congregation to honor someone outside of a financial consideration. And that is in part because we wanted the criteria to be held to. And the criteria were that whoever we named a room after, they needed to be significant in the history of Unitarian Universalist or UUCA itself, and that they reflect our mission as a congregation and our values, and that the person should no longer be living and should have been recognized as an exemplar of the mission and values that we hold dear as a congregation. As I said, it would be proposed to the congregation by majority vote, and we would reflect that decision with appropriate signage. So anyone using the room would have easy access to information about who the individual honored was and why they were chosen. And finally, the policy, again, a key board conversation was we wanted this policy to be up for review, but for a room naming decision to be up for review every 5 years. That we recognize the fluidity of our values, and well, maybe our values stay firm, right? But that over time we might have other people we're interested in honoring in that way. And with our rooms large and small in this building, we reserve the right to change the designation of these rooms over time. So that's the basic policy that the board adopted in May. And in the materials that you received, you saw a board resolution to the annual meeting of the congregation. And it says that the UU Church of Arlington proposes that the congregation consider adopting this resolution by majority vote. And it goes through the criteria and then proposes that the Reverend James J. Reeb holds a prominent role in the social justice history of Unitarian Universalism in that he answered the call of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for clergy to come to Selma and join forces with the Civil Rights March. And the 38-year-old father of four was attacked along with two other ministers by four white segregationists and died 2 days later, March 11, 1965. Reverend Reeb's murder prompted a national outcry that was followed by Dr. King dedicating his March 15, 1965 Selma March to his honor, and by President Johnson's introduction of the Voting Rights Act to Congress. And Reverend Reeb was a minister at the All Souls Church in Washington, D.C., and had visited UUCA, and our congregation was very familiar with Reverend Reeb. And after his death, after a speaker came to speak to our congregation about the circumstances surrounding his death, the members of UUCA were inspired to name our original church building Reeb Hall to honor his sacrifice, and felt that his example summons in us the bravery to continue our social justice mission and our fight against systemic racism. Therefore, our resolution says, be it resolved that the congregation of the UU Church of Arlington approves the dedication of its worship center to the memory of Reverend James J. Reeb, and that that room will now be known as the Reverend James J. Reeb Center. So, Bert?
Thanks, Linda. So we'll now open the discussion period on this proposal to rename the worship center for Reverend James J. Reeb. We've scheduled about 15 to 20 minutes for this discussion, but again, we're going to focus on the content. So if we as a group don't have extensive comments, then we'll just move on to the next voting item. I would ask if anybody in the sanctuary has any comments, if you'd like to come forward to either microphone. Okay. We're not seeing any comments in the sanctuary. Lisa, I'm going to ask if there are any comments on YouTube.
There are not.
There are no comments on YouTube. I do see some comments in the back. Dick, can I bring a microphone to you?
Yeah.
Thank you. As one of the signatories of the initial proposal that went to the board and ministers, I compliment and thank the board for its actions and the ministers. We appreciate so much you bringing this forward, and I urge you all to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Any other comments from the sanctuary? Okay. All right. Hearing none, we can move to our third voting item. So this item is to approve the 2023-2024 budget. Ashley Grieve is our treasurer for this year. She's actually not able to attend today. She's traveling for business, but she did present a video that gives a quick summary of the church's financial position and the budget. That video should be visible on the screen to my left, and you should be able to hear the audio. And then after we hear that report from Ashley, Reverend Amanda will present the budget for next year. So, Art, we can cue that up.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ashley Grieve, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees as well as the treasurer for the current fiscal year. I'm going to be giving you a summary of the annual treasurer's report, which was attached to the notice of the annual meeting circulated to the congregation. And afterward, we're able to take any questions you have. To begin with, the church's operating budget for this fiscal year was approved by the congregation last June. It consisted of $1.38 million in budgeted income and $1.44 million in budgeted expenses. It therefore had an expected deficit to be offset by draws from the endowment of other funds. As of the end of April of this year, that would be 83% of the way through the fiscal year. UUCA's total revenue stood at 146% of the budgeted amount, while the expenses stood at 116% of the budgeted amount. The success of our revenue generation is largely thanks to the hard work of our staff. This year, we received a Department of Homeland Security grant and Employee Retention Tax Credit, both of which brought in significantly more revenue than we had anticipated at the time of budgeting. On the expense side, electricity, gas, and insurance costs have all risen substantially, and notably, significant unanticipated building maintenance costs arose, particularly for the repair and upkeep of our HVAC systems, a lesson learned being that we need to budget higher costs for the ongoing maintenance of our aging building. Because we have overperformed on both revenue and expenses as compared to the approved budget, these may approximately cancel each other out, and we would end the year with a budget deficit as anticipated. We should also keep in mind that grants and credits are not a sustainable long-term solution to supporting a healthy and vibrant church life. The congregation's understanding of the need and desire for sustainable operations is reflected in the call for pledges to augment the upcoming fiscal year budget. Within a week, this congregation responded swiftly and generously and brought our upcoming year's budget into a healthier balance. As a result, the budget put forth for vote is much improved over the initial proposal. During the current fiscal year, the Board Finance and Audit Committee approved the selection of a new auditing firm and the carrying out of a full external audit. The audit is largely complete, although we don't have the final written report, but we do not expect that it will note any issues of concern. Where do we stand now with our liquidity and cash reserves? The church's reserves consist of amounts currently invested in 3 Fidelity mutual funds that hold funds for designated purposes or not needed for immediate expenses. Ordinary operational expenses are then paid from the church's operating checking account. If we add our cash reserves in the Fidelity account and our checking account balance, we find that we have around $665,000, representing approximately 5 months of operating expenditures. Our endowment savings represent another reserve of funding, although less liquid than the Fidelity funds and checking account. As of April 30th, the UUCA endowment savings consisted of nearly $560,000 invested in the UUA's Common Endowment Fund, or UUCEF, which is the pooled fund of which UUCA has a designated share of the total fund value. This $560,000 in the Common Endowment Fund is equal to around 43% of the operating expenditure budget for this fiscal year. Prior to 2017, the board set a target to maintain a balance in endowment savings of not less than 100% of the annual operating budget. However, as we drew down from the endowment to cover budget deficits year over year and to refinance the mortgage, the board adjusted the target to no less than 50% of the annual operating budget. Since we're now at 3%, we are falling a little short of that target, but headed in the direction of meeting it within the next 2 years. So how will we do that? How will we build up the balance in the Common Endowment Fund? The board, under advisement from our financial advisory staff, decided in March 2022 to withdraw $500,000 from the Common Endowment Fund to supplement the capital campaign funds available to cover the final mortgage payoff in April 2022. Since then, the board has been monitoring capital campaign collections and making installment payments to the Common Endowment Fund to restore the original value. In just 2 years, we have returned $225,000 of the $500,000 borrowed, with another $65,000 already collected and designated for future installment payments, and $330,000 in anticipated collections over the next 2 years. If we add these numbers together, that is, our current balance in endowment savings, the existing capital campaign collections that are yet to be transferred, and the anticipated remaining capital campaign collections, we expect to achieve a level of 65% of current operating expenses or their equivalents in the endowment savings, and the endowment fund will stand at approximately $1 million. At the end of the last two building campaigns, UUCA's long-term indebtedness stood at more than $4.4 million, which was gradually being repaid with annual principal payments. Through the capital campaign, we made a large payment in 2020, another in 2021, and a final payoff in 2022. Let me repeat that, although I understand you may have heard that several times, but let me repeat that because it's worth celebrating. Our mortgage has been paid off in its entirety. A fact that UUCA may be extremely proud of, and which has propelled us into our current state, where we can envision and build toward robust financial health. So to summarize, we are in a relatively strong financial position for any church coming out of the pandemic. We have approximately 5 months worth of funds between our Fidelity investment accounts and our cash checking account. We've used the capital campaign to free ourselves of deep year-over-year budget deficits due to our long-term mortgage, and we expect remaining collections through the capital campaign to help us restore the value of the endowment fund to around $1 million. These facts combined provide a strong base as we look to the future to build our sustainable financial future. So with that, we will turn now to the board members and Reverend Amanda, and we would be happy to take any questions you have. Thank you.
So I'm just going to thank Ashley for her review of how our finances look this year.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ashley Grieve, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees as well as the treasurer for the current fiscal year. I'm going.
So nice, we hear it twice. There we go. So I want to thank Ashley for that. I want to thank her also for her service as treasurer. So if you've seen the nominating committee slate, you've seen that Ashley is being nominated to be the vice chair, and actually our current vice chair, Linda Battolini, is being nominated to become the treasurer. So we're doing a little flip-flop, but they're both excellent candidates. I've worked with both of them. We're in really, really good hands, people. So talk about the nominating committee. I also want to thank especially Reverend Amanda, the board finance and audit committee, and then our director of finance, Eric Herding, who you may not see very much because he is a behind the scenes kind of guy, but if we have the position that we're in and the money that we're able to, the figures that Ashley were able to recite to you about our position are largely due to his extremely wise and counsel in terms of preserving our money. It's been wonderful to work with Eric. And then our own Nikki Steele, our church administrator, has been invaluable in helping Eric put together the raw data and make the choices that we needed to make for this congregation. So for all of them, this church benefits from excellent financial support. I'm going to turn things over, yes, all of whom deserve a round of applause. Yeah. I'm going to turn things over to Reverend Amanda to give a quick presentation, and then we'll do the discussion period. I did see some folks with hands. Give us 1 second to let Amanda speak, and then we can do the comments as we have been doing, as we were supposed to have done for the previous 2 voting meetings.
Thanks so much, Burke. And in addition to Nikki and Eric, who manage the budget, help to create the budget, really hold leadership in that area. I want to give a shout out to Annie Parker, who's in the back right now, who is a revenue generator for the budget. Annie, as many of you know, Annie manages our rentals, and Annie and Nikki are a powerhouse team of bringing in long-term rentals as well as one-time rentals. And that's made a difference, which is a great segue to looking at the budget for next year. Hopefully you have all read the budget narrative that I wrote. And oh, I see someone nodding. I'm so excited about that. Probably you've committed it to memory, I'm assuming. Was really great reading, good for bedtime. And so perhaps you know the basics. I'll just give some highlights to overview the budget that is proposed for next year. That budget does have a deficit. As alert readers will know, earlier in our process, we were looking at a deficit of $200,000, which was really more than we were feeling comfortable with. had a great budget listening session with some of the folks in this room and others. And coming out of that session, board and other lay leaders took on a special push to invite folks to raise their pledges or to pledge if they hadn't already. And thanks in large part to that increase that we saw in pledges after that, we are able to bring forward a budget with a deficit of under $90,000. I think it's an $89,000 budget deficit, 88 or 89. So that's the deficit that we're looking at for next year. You've heard from Ashley some of the reasons that we think that we can float that deficit for this year, thanks to our reserves and our endowment funds. Looking at the other sort of the revenue side of next year's budget, just a few things that I want to highlight for you. After that second push, our pledges came in about where they were last year. And you'll note that inflation has gone up significantly since last year. So we think about the pledges have stayed the same, they haven't dropped, but they haven't kept pace with inflation. So one of the things that we need to do as a congregation looking forward is to have some significant conversations about pledging, look at how we're doing our annual campaign, think about how we can engage people more fully so that hopefully our pledging can start to keep pace with inflation so that we can maintain a sustainable budget. However, we did meet last year's essentially pledging. Our rentals are budgeted at higher than last year. We're still not to pre-COVID levels, but they're up quite a bit from this year that we're in for next year's budget, and certainly up significantly from the year before, et cetera. We're continuing that recovery process. We also received some memorial gifts and bequests in this current fiscal year. When we receive those, they're put into kind of a holding space for the board to determine how to use them. And so they've been moved over then into revenue for the next budget year. So that will add over and help out with our revenue as well. And I think those are our major highlights on revenue. You know, we continue to increase incrementally some of our long-term rentals, all of those pieces. Looking over at the expenses side, the things that I'd like to highlight for you are that for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, we have an 8% COLA for staff. That's in line with the federal recommendation for COLA. And there was very strong clarity from the board and from lay leadership that gathered to talk about the budget that it felt important to be able to do that for our staff in this year of significant inflation. We also have the same giving to the UUA that we had this year, even though the ask went up. So that's a place where I hope to see growth and change in our budget in the coming years. We're making a contribution of $55,000 to the UUA. Their ask was $95,000 this year. So you can see that we're over half of the ask, but not where we would like to be. You heard already from Ashley about our increase in expenses like utilities, trash, insurance, all of those pieces are up. And of course, those aren't things that we tend to be able to negotiate. We also have a new stormwater tax assessment from Arlington County that we're budgeting in. I think those are the highlights I'd like to bring out for you in terms of expenses and revenue. I do want to note two things on staffing in particular, because they're the things I've gotten the most questions about, so just try to anticipate your questions. One of those is that, as you saw, if you read the budget narrative, we are putting that new director of music position at 3/4 time, which is the number of hours that Sophia was employed at 3/4 time. Right now, Jesse, as the interim director, is at 20 hours, so half time. So we go back up to the 3/4 time, but not at the full time that we had hoped for. You know, I think as we proposed a deficit budget, overall, we didn't feel comfortable putting that to a full-time position and worried about sustainability as we went forward. Decided we would rather put it at 3/4 time and then be able to grow it over the years to come. So I want to make sure that people understand that. And then the other piece that I've gotten questions about, and I think it's just a timing piece that has folks confused. I've had several people ask whether we are planning to keep that director of congregational life position that Sarah Masters held at the same hours. I think folks got confused because of the timing and thought that there was a budgetary element there, which is not the case, it's just coincidental timing. So we do expect to keep a position in that area, you know, I mean, I think we'll use the time to have conversations about exactly how it's titled and what's in the portfolio and how do we want to think about it, right? All the things you do when you have a position come open, you utilize that to think toward the future. But we do anticipate it being at 30 hours a week. So I've had several questions on that. I just wanted to get ahead of those questions if I could, that we expect that to be status quo. And we'll likely hire for that position as we move toward the fall. Okay, I think that's what I want to say for highlights, and then I'm happy to take any questions. And Linda's here with a list of facts, so we are ready to answer your questions about our finances and budgets. Go for it.
So thank you, Reverend Amanda. Again, we'll open the discussion period for this item. We've scheduled, again, about 15 to 20 minutes on this, but we'll focus on the content. So if there aren't extensive comments or questions from the floor, we'll move on to our fourth and final voting item. I did see some folks who had hands up, so I'm going to ask now, are there any comments or questions from folks present in the sanctuary? Emily, do you want to grab a mic?
Just a point of information, and if I missed this in the documents, forgive me. Do the part-time positions carry benefits?
Yes, we offer benefits starting at 20 hours a week. The benefits are prorated, as you would expect, but yes.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from folks? Francesca, do you want to?
Wait, why don't you bring it over, Bert?
Yeah.
Thank you. I became a Unitarian in 1977 and a member of the Mount Vernon Unitarian Church. I served as a social action chair and in the choir and many other things until my divorce was pending, and I came here. I heard about the choir and I wanted to belong. I joined the choir before I joined the church. And Jesse has all the experience that he needs. He could work at 36 hours or 40 hours. And since you have no Sarah here, why not allow him to have at least 36 hours?
Well, that's not really how I do budgets. I want to make sure that we have all of the positions funded that need to be funded in different areas. So having an individual leave a position doesn't mean that we don't need that position anymore.
I know, but you don't need it this minute. But could you not be persuaded to offer Jesse 36 hours?
I'm not totally sure how to respond because I really I don't know that it's an appropriate forum to have a conversation about individual staff members.
Yeah.
So I would just say that we've set up the budget in the way that we think will best serve the mission of the congregation going forward. And that's been in conversations with musicians, members of the choir, the music director search team as we move forward with the board and lay leadership so that all of the positions are staffed as we're able to afford them and as will best suit the needs of the mission as a whole.
For folks who are raising their hands, I'm going to bring the microphone here, so if we could follow the comment procedure.
First off, my name is Bill Walls, and I'd like to thank Reverend Amanda, Reverend CTC, everybody, for having this annual meeting. An annual budget requires both expenses and income. How do you plan to expand membership to bring us back up to what it was? Because I think membership is an important component to an annual budget. So would you address that? Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree, Bill. When I offered the budget narrative, there's kind of a section in there looking forward, right? Sort of as we pass this budget, how do we also look at sustainability longer term? And I think that's exactly what you're speaking to here. And I named a few things. One of them is simply with our current membership, what are the conversations we need to have around pledging, around engagement with the annual campaign? And then and then I talked about rentals and utilizing our assets, our like long-term assets and land and building assets in creative ways. And then exactly as you said, how do we think as well about expanding our membership? One of the things that we've been talking about a lot on staff recently is, you may have seen, we actually have a pretty large number of newcomers who are finding us on Sunday mornings. I'm noticing some of the Sunday ambassadors nodding. And so part of what it feels like the task is right now is to engage those newcomers so that they become significant parts of the congregation, right? So that they find their way in. Congregations often, and a large congregation is especially susceptible to this, have a challenge where folks feel really welcome. They come in and everybody's welcome. They feel really great. They feel great for 3 or 4 weeks. They feel great maybe for 4 or 5 weeks. And then they start to feel like, well, I've been welcomed now, but where are the actual deeper relationships that I'm starting to build? Sometimes folks will say, if you don't have a friend in the congregation within 6 months maybe, there's some congregational sort of numbers, you're not going to end up staying. So it's developing those deeper relationships so that we can help our newcomers to feel engaged and then therefore feel, as we all do, responsible for the mission of the congregation and for building a sustainable future. So we're focusing on that. That's in line with one of the board's or the congregation's annual vision of ministry goals as well, of really deepening the number of people who are connected in. I think that we are seeing right now the effect of the loss of new members during those 2 years of pandemic that were really either fully closed or partially closed. The newcomers of those years would be now, I remember Sarah explaining this so well, would now be the sort of leaders, the emerging leaders of this year, right? So we've missed them. We have this year's newcomers, but they're not emerging and engaged leaders yet. And so we kind of missed a year and a half there, and we're seeing the effects of that. So I think it's about rebuilding. The LEAD program is a piece of that. The Leadership Exploration and Development Program is a piece of that. And we have some ideas on staff for doing a full congregation audit, really looking at the ways that people are engaged, member by member, and then newcomer by newcomer. So that's where the focus is right now for us. Thanks. Okay, great. I could say more, but we don't need to keep going.
I had some questions regarding the audits. I think I'm slightly confused as to the financial audit as opposed to maybe the audit of the whole church.
Oh, yes,
Like, who is our auditor that was hired, or is that someone from the overarching organization, UUA?
Thanks, Julia. I just made that confusing by saying audit when I don't mean a financial audit when I was referring to membership. What is the name of the audit company? Do you remember? Oh my gosh, where's Nikki? Nikki knows. I don't know. Nikki's looking it up. Nikki's going to tell us in a minute. We'll get you the name of that audit company. It's a new one to us. We have worked with the same auditing company for a number of years, and it was time to try something new. And so none of us remember the name off the top of our heads, but we've enjoyed working with them. CST Group CPA. Thank you, Nikki. Excellent. Did I answer your question, Julia? When I was talking about auditing the membership, take out the word audit. I mean like assessing, right, analyzing, trying to take a look and say, oh, Lila, now let's see, is Lila involved? Is there something that's really tying Lila to the congregation? Okay, great, yes, fine. What about Chris? That kind of thing, right? Different. So have used an outside audit firm. Julia's back because we didn't answer her question. Come on till we answer it. Hang on just a second, Eric. I'm going to let Julia come in and
You did by giving me the name of the auditor.
Great.
But is that like an annual or church year contract with that
Gotcha.
auditor?
We have for the last number of years, in part because we were required to do so because we had a mortgage. alternated between a full audit and a financial review, both of which were done by outside professional audit companies. This next year, we're taking a break for that year, and then we can always go back, having just done a full audit this year, a full, just what it would like, just if you know what audits are, right? A full audit of the congregational year, 21 to 22, and then we're taking a break this next year. Thanks for your patience, Eric.
I wanted to come back to the theme that Bill, previous questioner, asked about. What are we doing to raise income? And remind us that there's a lot the music program can do. And remind us, those that were here last Sunday and heard Phyllis Liner's very skillful, brief but complete history of the music program, demonstrated to me, reminded me how much more significant our music program has been in the past. And as part of that past, we used to do concerts that generated income for the general fund. Of course, to put on those extra activities requires a lot of hours of coordination by the director. And so that bears on this question of how many hours we're going to support. So thank you.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Eric. Thank you. The revenue model for the budget next year does include a fundraiser in there. We actually have some folks who are interested in bringing back the auction, which I think people are excited about, the services auction. But I have also absolutely heard from the music folks, just as you said, some interest in being part of those fundraisers. So I think we'll look at what we can create in the coming year. And you're right, it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg, right, as we kind of find our way through together and continue to build and rebuild that program. Could not agree more.
Yes, as some of you know, I have a communications background, so Amanda will have heard some of this. I have two thoughts about increasing our membership. One is to reach out to people who used to come and who aren't coming now. And, carefully worded, but see why they aren't coming back and encourage them and welcome them to do so. I've also thought about a mentoring program for visitors who come in. So I felt lost. And one person came up and said hello to me. And I think that was Dick McTaggart, no surprise. What?
Yep, David, he's right there, David McTaggart, yep.
Oh, there you are. The other thing is, it would be nice to have more, dare I say, younger people join, and because they give energy and kids that can come up and listen to your story times. I think people of that era that we want to bring in need to have a good website.
Yes.
And you've heard me talk about that, and I'm hoping, even though there's a reduced budget for communications, that we can really focus on that this year, because I think that's critical.
Our goal is to have the new website unrolled, hopefully by the fall of this coming fall. So it's Katie's main project over the summer when things at the church are a little quieter. But Katie's been working hard on that and doing some building on her own. So there's a fair amount that's kind of built out but not ready to be live yet. And I really love what you said, Dee, and just emphasize it for all of us that as much as the Sunday ambassadors are our official greeters, it is the welcome that every member offers to newcomers that really makes the difference. And it's not just the hello, it's also the, would you like to join me while we eat the empanadas together? Or it's the, will I see you next week? Or I hear there's an ice cream truck. Do you want to head out with me to the parking lot to grab ice cream together? It's those pieces that make a huge difference. So I love that David was able to be that for you, and we're always looking at ways to help people connect in better, especially post-COVID when some of us lost our people skills a little bit during that time, and we're still rebuilding them. So thank you. I think we're good.
Stealing your mic for a second. Any further comments from the sanctuary? Comments or questions? Okay. Lisa, are there comments or questions from the YouTube channel?
There are a couple of comments that may not be really about the budget, but So Bruce Ryder wrote, I would like to thank the board for a thoughtful and democratic process. And I have to say, I agree with that. So, and then Diana Day wrote, on YouTube, I hear Ashley's voice twice, sounding like an echo. And I think some of the rest of us heard that also. And then Art Stevens wrote, I apologize for the audio. We have not been able to solve this in real time. We can't, but this is important, we can provide the original video afterward. And then UUCA Publications reminded us that we can get the meeting documents, including the treasurer's summary, and included a link for that, which I think was in the email also. So that's it.
I really enjoy that like live tweet version of support and care for each other. That was really beautiful. And all cheers to our AV folks making it work however they can.
Great. So with the end of those comments, all of which are wonderful, we're going to move on to our fourth and our final voting item, which is the presentation of the slate of nominees for members of the Board of Trustees for the next year and the officer positions as well, and also the members of the nominating committee who will be joining us for next year as well. So I'm going to ask Mary Pike to present that slate. Thank you.
Thank you, Burke. It's been a pleasure serving on this year's nominating committee. We worked diligently to prepare this slate for you, and we were really fortunate to interview a number of people that were very willing and eager to help UUCA both now and in the future. So on behalf of the nominating committee, I'm pleased to announce the following slate of candidates to the congregation for the 2023-2025 year. And as I read your name, please stand up if you're here. For new board candidates for a 2-year term, Rachel Burnett and Joy Gaddy.
Woohoo! Joy's in England.
Continuing,
but Rachel's here.
Continuing for another 2 years is Gail Curran. Secretary for a 1-year term is Emily Abraham, who was here earlier. But
She
I
was
don't
here. I think
see
she
her
probably
now.
had to grab her
Yeah.
kids.
Treasurer with dual role as board member, 1-year term, Linda Bagdalini. Continuing as assistant treasurer for another year is Robert Gayer.
Woo-hoo! He was here too.
And for the nominating committee for the 3 new 2-year term people, Nancy Hyde, Ron Teeter, and Diane Williams.
Woohoo!
And Diane was here earlier and had to leave as well. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mary. We'll now open up a discussion period for anyone who wishes to speak on the slate of nominees. Again, we'll follow the same procedure, and if there are no comments from the sanctuary or from YouTube, we can conclude our discussion of voting items. Are there would anyone present in the sanctuary like to raise a comment or a question on any of the members of the slate?
Yay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yay, thank you for serving UUCA.
Thank you for doing this. Yes, exactly. Any other comments? Thank you for seating that, by the way. Okay, Lisa, any comments from YouTube?
No more.
No comments from YouTube. Okay, great, fantastic. That's because it's an awesome slate. All right, so that concludes the presentation of the voting items and the discussion of each item. So at this point, we're going to take a brief stretch break for 10 minutes to allow members to vote, if you haven't voted already, via the link sent to you in an email from Election Buddy. So again, the reminder email was sent to all of those who have not yet voted just before the beginning of this meeting. So if you're one of those members, the reminder email should be near the top of your inbox. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't voted, you need to log out of this meeting to access, and you need to log out of this meeting to access your email. Please do so. You can always vote and then rejoin the live stream using the same YouTube link you used to join earlier. If you have any questions on YouTube or any issues you're running into, please email Annie Parker at aparker@uucava.org. In Washington, D.C., I shouldn't have to say this, but I will, you can only vote once. And many of you have probably already voted. So if you can,
Literally only can vote
you can only vote once, technologically speaking, but morally and ethically speaking too. And if you can take a short break while the folks here who have not voted do so. It is now 1:49. Let's come back at 1:59 to conclude the meeting and hear the voting results. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. It is now precisely 2 o'clock, and we are waiting for the final tabulation of the votes, which we'll have in just one moment. Voting is closed now. Where's the banana? I need the banana.
Don't let Lisa have the gavel. She's gavel happy.
Okay, Francesca, do you want it, can we wait until we're done? No? Okay. All right.
Who's supposed to have the votes? Jeff, right? Yes, it looks like Jeff is still back there with Annie. Yeah. Here comes Jeff. That's my drum roll for Jeff.
You're stepping on my line.
Oh my God.
You're stepping on my line. Okay. All right. So we're going to move to our last agenda item, the announcement of the voting results. So our secretary, Jeff Mayer, has the vote totals from Election Buddy. Jeff, would you like to tell us how the voting went at today's annual meeting?
Indeed. At the congregational meeting today, we had 61 attendees in person, 22 views on YouTube, and 118 who voted prior to the meeting, some of whom are also in attendance. This amounts to a total of 172 voting. Of those 172 total member votes, for item number 1, approval of the June 5th, 2022 minutes, there were 156 votes in favor of approval and 2 abstentions. There were no votes. Item number 2, approval of the room renaming proposal. There were 161 votes for and 0 against. No abstentions. So this item is approved.
Yep.
Item number 3, approval of the 2023 annual budget. There were 160 votes in favor, 1 vote against, and 1 abstention, and so this item is approved.
Yep.
Item number 4, approval of the nominating committee slate for members of the Board of Trustees, UUCA officers, and nominating committee. There were 167 votes for, 0 votes against, 0 abstentions. This item is approved.
Great. All right. So thank you, Jeff. So with those vote totals, all of the voting items have been approved for the 2022-2023 annual meeting and this year. So we have now completed the business for this annual meeting, and with that, the work of the 2022-2023 church year. The church year actually does go to June 30th, so we've got a little more time, but the work is done. Congratulations to the board members, to the officers, to the nominating committee members, and to the GA delegates selected and elected. We look forward to working with you this summer and into the next church year. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank every single person in the congregation for helping make this last year as great as it was. As we say, we are the church. So whether you simply came to Sunday services or watched online, or whether you were on more committees than you could count, you are part of this church, and we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you very much. Amanda, any concluding remarks?
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the annual meeting if you are still in this room. Thank you for your dedication to UUCA. It is always an honor to serve with and for you.
Thanks, everybody. We're done.